meeting.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I will call the meeting to order. Ask for obviously disclosure of any pecuniary interest or general nature from anybody. Not hearing any. We'll move on. The agenda is in front of us. I was a little unsure of a couple of things on here, but decided to leave them. Are there any comments or before we approve the agenda? Anybody want to make any comments? Bev?
Lauren, yeah, for the round table G2, I would like to add a discussion in regard to process.
Okay. All right, we're going to add some time there. I'm thinking we probably can, we won't have the discussion G3 because Deb is not here today. Scott, do you have anything more you want to add in G1? These are really, these are almost parts or minutes. Scott?
Yeah, that I don't recall requesting anything more than that.
Okay, so okay, Bev, we'll keep you in for G2 there, and that'll give us some time for the items that are on the next page when we get that far.
Okay.
So can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move.
Scott, thank you.
I'll second.
Second, Bev. All in favor? Good, thank you. Business arising for the minutes. We don't have anything marked in there right now. We don't have reports coming in. We're into the round, what is called the round table there. Scott, you didn't have anything more to add in G1?
G1?
Yeah, in the agenda.
No, I had a chance to go through most of the comments in my end of the municipality, and I think I've got what I need.
Okay, and that will come into the areas in section I. We'll get some more discussion on that when we get that far.
Okay, great.
Okay, Bev.
Okay, so I don't think we ever received a list of the residents that received the letters, and I'm wondering if we're going to be able to have that list. Because it's easier to, because people don't call me and say I'm lot whatever. They call me and say this is my name. Is that going to be provided to us?
Guess Jennifer, is that a question that you would be bouncing? Are you there, Jennifer?
Sorry, I'm just discussing with Roxanne. We would have gotten a list from Jail Richards.
Different letters that went out.
Yeah, so we can provide those to council.
Okay.
So I just want to make that clear, though, that list will only be going to council members.
That's understood.
On the committee.
That's fine.
That's understood. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be beneficial, right, Denny?
Yeah. All right.
The other thing, I'm still a little bit confused on the process, and I'm just going to, I'm really wondering about how much non-productive land is trapped in agricultural land. So I'm just going to run some figures by you that, been sort of gleamed from here and there and all over. But my understanding is before we even thought of LEAR, we had 11,723 acres of prime ag land and 5,558 acres of rural land.
Can I clarify just for the people that are listening, those are numbers that were printed on the maps in the OPA 29 report as numbers that were proposed by, I presume, the consultant as the amount of prime land we're starting with, the amount of rural land we're starting with, and then the proposed LEAR area. Go ahead, Bev.
Yeah, so that's an increase of 3,345 acres of prime land. So what I'm wondering is, we were never really told You know, with the whole business, it looks like with the LEAR overlay, we have 15,068 acres of prime land. But how much of that is actual non-productive land trapped in agricultural land? That's a question that I don't think we've ever been able to answer. And so,
I think the other question, is when Bev and I were discussing this, is how much productive farmland was left outside of the LEAR map. I think they're the numbers we need to understand.
yeah, because certainly some, I'm aware of some people who have what is now considered prime ag land that's being turned to rural. And I think there's been people who've questioned it. So I'm just wondering, can those numbers be provided for us?
Mark, I think I could take a shot at answering. I think one thing that needs to be clarified is the definition of productive and non-productive. Do you mean more so like lands that are being farmed versus not, or
Well, okay,
just say soils that are conducive to farming?
Let me try to clarify, Gabrielle, and I'm doing this because Bev and I had a discussion there so ago on this. The 15,068 hectares is the proposed, and albeit proposed just at the point in the study, amount of what we would call prime agricultural that would be trapped in the LEAR map or LEAR overlay. And so if we started with 11,723 hectares of prime agricultural land, I presume in the whole municipality, and we didn't get maybe 2,000, 3,000 hectares of that. I don't know. We didn't get a bunch of that into the LEAR overlay, but we ended up with 15,068 hectares of what we call prime. So if I take the 15,068 and subtract, say, 9,000, 10,000, there's 5,000 acres of rural land that we've trapped as islands inside that LEAR map. And I guarantee that within 6 months of approving the study, somebody will come in and say, I want that rocky ridge taken out because I want to build a house on it. I think it's suggesting to Bev and I right now, this process isn't working. The LEAR is wrong for a municipality in Eastern Ontario that has its prime agricultural land spread all over the place.
And Lauren, you bring a good point there. I've been kind of filtering through I don't know, Gabrielle, correct me on my number here, probably 60 submissions so far.
I think
I have about 129 emails, but a lot of those are, I want to provide clarification, I want to provide additional information. So I think we're close to 60 in terms of the submissions that we've received just as a result of the mail out. So now I'm not even factoring those that were as part of the virtual info session or anything May, June, July. I'm really just talking July, August, September. We're probably at around 60 submissions, excluding those that have specifically called me just to talk about this and understand the process. And Lauren, that this is an interesting question. And the topic of is LEAR appropriate is actually a great one, because a lot of my answers to people is the fact that the PPS definition now includes the adjacent lands. Whether or not we go with LEAR or we go with class 1, 2, 3 in adjacent areas, I guess that's the big question. LEAR does provide a bit more flexibility in the inputs. If we were to use just the class 1, 2, 3 in the adjacent lands as defined in the PPS, the number is actually greater than that. And that's actually the agricultural memo that was produced in 2018, which I believe was produced and provided to members of this committee. And what that was, at the direction of Steve Sterling, the manager of planning of the day, we had looked at what are the class 1, 2, 3 soils where majority of those parcels are class 1, 2, 3. And if we were to bring every parcel that is more than 50% class 1, 2, 3 soils, what would that represent in terms of capturing those adjacent lands?
Yeah.
And we could provide that. I believe it was provided. I could probably get it really quickly on the screen here as well, but it's a significant amount more than what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So I guess, so if we were to defer to I guess I say there's options 1 and 2 for designating prime ag. Option 1 is the class 1, 2, 3 in the adjacent lands. Option 2 is LEAR. So I guess the question is, do we continue with LEAR and just, I think at this point we should probably continue with LEAR, but it's just a question of, are there specific areas? And we've done the overlay of the existing with the proposed as well, so we can actually see where are the major changes. And that's maybe something, we're still waiting for the ag community to tell us with a marker. These are the areas that we want to reconsider. These are the areas that should be taken out. But yes, there is by default, irrelevant of if we use PPS class 1, 2, 3 in adjacent lands, or if we use LEAR, there are going to be poor pockets. I'll call them poor pockets. There are going to be these poor pockets captured within the designation. And that is intentional on the ministry's part to capture those.
Yeah. Scott, your microphone's off.
Yeah, sorry, I have some young pups that are using squeaky toys. I have a question on the PPS 1, 2, 3, and you say anything with 1, 2, 3 gets captured along with adjacent lands. So if you go with the PPS 1, 2, 3, does that still have to be in 200 hectare blocks?
No, the 250 hectare.
So that would swallow up Cedar Hill. That would take in the stuff that's up by Clayton. All those ones that don't meet the 200 hectare cutoff would then be consumed.
Yeah, and I could send that to the committee after this, or I can share it, but I don't want to go back to a 2018 memo. But yeah, I can share that with the committee if you don't have it. But yeah, it basically what we had done was we had taken the existing Schedule A, which has your agricultural lands, but are kind of a meandering belt throughout the community. And through GIS would basically said if the parcel is more than 50% class 1, 2, 3, that parcel comes in.
Yeah.
And that was basically capturing the adjacent lands. Now one could have said if any parcel is 1, 2, 3, then capture it, but we just filtered at 50 because the numbers were significantly higher. If you took any parcel that had class 1, 2, 3, and you said that the remainder was at the adjacent lands. So working with Steve Sterling back in 2017, I think that was, we had filtered it at 51% more of class 1, 2, 3. I think that was the number, and that was what had been presented through open house sessions and things like that. But by memory, it was from 11,000 to 18,000, just as a reference point. Sorry, Lauren.
Mark, I'm sorry, but in a discussion rather than trying to chair it, I remember that discussion, and we were impressed with what we had there, but it scared us because there's a lot of adjacent land attached to that is liable to get eroded. But at least we don't trap the land inside a map and say, okay, it's there forever unless somebody decides they're going to start to erode the map, and then we got dental decay in there, and if that's what's going to happen, maybe we've got to start with that. I mean, maybe we should be looking at that map as an alternative somewhere along the line now, and just seeing if it makes sense.
Yeah, I think that discussion happened with the previous council. I know I was not part of it. And I know from talking with Mayor Lowry, there was a decision to go with LEAR because they thought it was a better choice. But as we get more into the LEAR, I'm seeing all sorts of problems with it. So I wouldn't mind looking at that, the class 1, 2, 3 and adjacent lands sort of document. Just Danny, do you remember any of it?
No, but again, we didn't realize at the time, I don't believe, that it was going to be in a 250 hectare parcels either that we were dealing with. Again, 1, 2, 3 seemed to be the standard figure that we were working with, and everything else after that down to number 7 was kind of, I'm not suggesting surplus, but by the same token, it certainly didn't capture all of Mississippi Mills. And I'd like to come back maybe with what Scott had said too, or asked rather, if we did something different, would we then reduce the 250 down to another figure?
Well, I think I would understand we actually wipe out the concept of the 250. It's no longer an element in the study. What we're doing is saying we're not going to paint an area with a big brush. We're going to go in and we're going to look at the prime agricultural land. And if that prime agricultural land occupies whatever that number was, 50, 60% of a particular area, that whole thing becomes prime agricultural land. So it does jack it up, and we got a lot of rocky knolls in there. But at least we're not doing what we've done in this study, and that's take a minimum of 6,000 hectares of non-productive rural land and paint it with a yellow paintbrush and call it prime agricultural land, which it isn't and never was, and it doesn't make it any more productive by doing that. I'll shut up.
But I think the problem too is that, yeah, I can appreciate 1, 2, and 3, but again, realistically, how much of that is really within Mississippi Mills? And there's a lot of 4, 5, 6, 7 that is farmed, actively farmed. So how do we draw that parallel out?
But Councillor Ferguson, I just want to reiterate, even if there's farming activity on classes 1 all the way through 7, even in wetlands, even if there's farming on any of those, it doesn't mean that can't occur. It just, from a provincial point of view, they're just not going to be considered as prime agricultural areas.
Yeah.
So farming can occur anywhere in the rural areas, even in, I got to watch about the urban because
Yeah.
the livestock facilities and things like that. But urban farming, let's not go there. But the agricultural use, just because we're trying to protect the right lands. It's
That's
not
right.
a question of where is farming happening and where should farming happening, is what are the lands that need to be protected under provincial policy, and that's right, kind of that's the end, that's the goal. I think, we were asking, what is our goal here? Our goal is to protect the right lands.
Yeah.
And we have the 2006 community official plan right now, which we know from using it over the years, there's problems with applying a meandering belt. We have difficulties when it comes to consents. We have difficulty when it comes to land use. We have difficulty when it comes to MDS. And we see a lot of areas that are being impacted. The farmers are being impacted negatively by these poor pockets everywhere, where now we're seeing a strong push for consents, or even just for people building on these lots. And we're applying minimum distance separation, and we're affecting a lot of the viability of a lot of these farms by telling them they can't basically expand because there's been an introduction of these dwellings around them. And it's a fine point of where should there be rural consents. And that's why, since 2000, pretty much, your document's been geared towards the villages and the urban areas and limited rural residential, which is still the vision today for provincial policy. So the real question here is not where is farming activity happening, is which soils or which areas should be protected.
Yeah.
Right. And we use LEAR because we thought LEAR would provide some flexibility in interpreting the right areas by screening in certain areas and screening out certain areas. I don't think the 250, personally, I don't think, because I've done the exercise of actually circling areas and calculating areas within the GIS, and I don't think it's the 250 hectare block necessarily that's the big issue. I think the big issue we're having is, where do we stop the 250 hectare area? And I've been having that discussion with a lot of people in it. For example, when we go all the way to the river, we're capturing a lot of rural residential, a lot of waterfront properties that probably shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And it's just, and a large part of that was our GIS person interpreting, you taking words from OMAFRA and trying to apply it to a map, right? And the word was stop where you hit a natural divider, the river. So GIS applies it and it brings it to the river. What we're trying to do is work with you guys and say, well, that natural divider really should be this, we should stop here, or we should stop identifying these lands, and we should identify, even if it's not 250 hectare area, I think we've repeated this many times now, even if there's an area that's not 250, we could still bring it in. It's just, we need to make sure that we have a good rationale to bring it in, and those areas that we want to bring out, we just have a good rationale to bring those out. So for sure, we can do the overlay of what is currently, what had been proposed. If you do the class 1, 2, 3 and adjacent, we could show you what's being proposed with LEAR. It's really just a question of looking at those overlays and then taking a marker to them and saying, let's refine. And I think now with GIS, with our GIS tool, you can actually see where a lot of the submissions or comments are. And a lot of them are by default these people that feel that they have poor pockets, or that they shouldn't be within the agricultural. A lot of them tell you the truth. I think it's just a lot of people don't even know the current policies. A lot of people don't want to be ag or want to be rural because they want to do subdivisions.
Yeah,
So I
Yeah.
would say half of them don't even know that the current policies won't even permit them to sever. Even the 1+2, a lot of people don't even know that they're not even eligible for that. A lot of people think that they still have severance rights, and by going ag, they lose those.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that by going ag, they can't build a dwelling on their lot. So there's a lot of misconception as well, even though we've got the Q&A and we've had the virtual session and we've got the reports out there. Not many people are looking at them. I spent half an hour with a fella this morning and he did not look at them. He knows they're there, but why? He might as well just call me and ask me his questions. So there's a lot of just misconception that they think they're losing development rights by going ag, or that by going rural, pits and quarries are going to be introduced.
Yeah.
So this is a lot of the comments I'm getting.
Ken, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and patiently trying to get in on this one. I'm going to say slightly disappointed in the way the conversation is going here today, because I think this is the second, if not the third meeting that we are back at this same issue of why LEAR. It was a previous council decision. It was accepted by the county that we would actually do a LEAR in order to move this answer forward. And right now we don't have that answer, and it's impacting other business of the municipality, such as us dealing with villages and our rural project that is part of the strategic direction of council. We're back at this issue of why a LEAR again. I think that has been chosen to some degree. And from the way I understand it, maybe I'm simplifying this too much, but the LEAR methodology is basically 70% based on the classification of soils with a little bit of tinkering on the edges. And like I said, this is the second or third meeting that we're back at this exact same issue again. And we've come to this committee time and time again, asking for you to provide comment about why the boundaries are wrong, or where we need to focus, or give us examples of some of these things, and it's not happening. Last meeting we provided, just like Mark has just said, where is the natural boundary? OMAFRA is telling us go for things like rivers. We brought you an example of James Naismith Way, which has residential lots around it. We said this, according to OMAFRA, would be part of the LEAR, and we'd extend it right to the river, and it's done. And we all know that there's half a dozen or a dozen houses that are going to go up there. And with MDS, like Mark is saying, that's then going to impact the operations around it. We've asked you for comment. There's been no comment given to us. There's been no direction given to us. We've provided a couple of other areas that we want your specific feedback in, and we're not getting any comment about why those lands should or should not be designated a certain way. As Mark has just said, again, if we want to include a portion of an area that's not 250 hectares, we can do it. We're asking you to help define where the questions are and the boundaries are. And we're not getting any real tangible feedback from this committee about this.
I think the reason you're not getting tangible feedback is we're spinning our wheels and we're confused and we don't know exactly what we're doing here. It's fine to say we're not giving tangible feedback, but you know, somewhere along the line, we need to be able to have clarity on, yeah, this is exactly what we're doing. And Ken, I don't see that. I'm sorry to have to say that, but that's the way I feel about it.
Ken,
But what the clarity that we're looking for is, like I just said, let's look at an area which, according to class 1, 2, or 3 or LEAR, you'd end up designated as agricultural land. Because remember, the point here is about, just as everybody was nodding their heads 5 or 10 minutes ago, it's about protecting the right land.
That's
and
right.
As you're going with these smaller parcels, you're going to set yourselves up to erode the right lands in the future, because people are going to be able to take a smaller block out here and here and here. We can recognize the poor pockets in this. I mean, Marcus is saying, like, you are going to capture some of these issues. But again, we do have some points here where, you know, this will move forward if we start talking about the particular areas that have issues and why or why not. Remember, the score that comes out of the LEAR is not the defining factor here. You can massage the boundaries of where this is based on your input. If you don't like where you know, a piece of land on the fringe or something like this, or even in the middle is not appropriate, let's identify those areas and have the conversation about why it is or is not. But you're not getting to that point.
No,
I'm just
we're
trying
not.
to say, we need, you know, if you need us to point to the examples again and put them on the screen and have a discussion about them, we can do that. But you're still stuck talking about whether the LEAR is the right process again. And
Ken, I'm hearing your point. I'm hearing your point very clearly, and it was totally expected today. I don't think we had clarity. I think in the last meeting, we discussed with Mark areas that should be considered, and we concurred with what was obvious there, that things like the bottom of Naismith Road should be, the border should be moved away from the river to take those out. I don't think you ever asked the committee to go in and give specific comments on specific areas so that you would use those. I understood from Mark that you were asking for opinion and position on those, and we gave opinion and position that those sorts of properties should have the boundaries moved. What I think we've moved to here is a discussion, and you just said it as well, of going inside the LEAR area map and taking out areas that are obviously not productive farmland. In other words, cutting holes into the LEAR area map, which I think is totally valid. And I think that brings it around to what Mark is suggesting with the older map. What I am concerned about is, before we even started this municipality established an MDS that said, put the minimum distance separation on the land to be developed. Don't put it in and impose it on agriculture. And that has gone unheeded in just about every minor variance application that's come in to the municipality. So if we do either a LEAR or we use the 1, 2, and 3 and adjacent, we have to put into that policy the minimum distance separation policy and ask that it get heeded. I watched the one on Gleason Road. We had industrial, river, and farm. Which minimum distance separation was violated by the time you were done? Agriculture gets no priority. If we're going to do this, we have to do this and ensure that we are maintaining an agricultural priority by the time we're done. And putting non-productive land into a LEAR area map is not heeding the value of productive land. That doesn't make it any more productive. So I think the question still needs to be asked, is the LEAR appropriate? Okay. Mark, can we get that overlay from you, and can we identify some actions that this committee should look at between now and the next meeting to evaluate the values of those two options, and maybe have some small discussions with you or Gabrielle to figure out whether we're going the right direction, wrong direction, or what we're doing there, so that we can at least test that alternative?
You're talking overlay existing with proposed LEAR?
Well, you can't really overlay. It's going to have to be two maps side by side, I expect.
Because we've provided at the last committee meeting, we provided full-size prints of the existing with the proposed LEAR as an overlay. So
and
the
that's
committee
also
should
available in the interactive map as well as
so we uploaded that, so all that's on the GIS as well, so you can see what is currently designated and you can see what is proposed as well.
What about the 2018 map?
The 2018 map, I can, well, again, I go back to Mr. Kelly's point here. Are we staying with LEAR? Because our whole methodology and our whole work here to date has been based on LEAR. But if you do look side by side, you'll see they are very, very close. I'll resend the memo with the appendix, where I'm trying to share my screen, but again, we're not going to do a whole lot of sharing screen here, and I'm not having permission to share my screen.
I share your frustration in this. We are not making the progress that we should be making, and I think it's an inability for committee members to walk away from the meeting and sit down and say, okay, I can tell Mark what I think should happen there. I think we've got to try to put some interested people in the room with Mark, with Gabrielle, and go through some of these, because if we have the ability to exclude some non-productive land from the middle of the LEAR map, that's good. That may make the LEAR work. Scott, microphone.
You're
Microphone.
on mute.
Yeah, I was just wondering if in the interest of expediency, it might make sense to kind of reverse engineer this process, meaning to go and start looking at the properties that we have a problem with or that we perceive there to be a problem, and get those all on the table.
Yeah.
And then we can look at which methodology would best accommodate those objections, rather than questioning the methodology before we've figured out exactly where the
Okay, yeah,
objections lie. I know looking through the comments that are up in my end, the municipality, most of them seem to have to do with just people who don't really understand what's going on. It's just more questions rather than objections. I only saw one, and I think that's the guy who said he's already built a retirement home, but he didn't get around to severing it, and he's worried that he's going to not be able to sever his retirement home. That was the only objection in a good chunk of everything north of Blakeney that I saw. So I wonder if that might be an approach. I kind of thought today we were going to get down to actually sifting through, going property by property.
And I think that should be the goal, really, because even if we do go with the CLI soils approach, where we look to designate class 1, 2, and 3 soils and adjacent lands only, we're still going to be proposing to designate properties that just say have high scoring soils, but have current or existing uses that have nothing to do with farming and would actually be an issue with MDS anyway. And so I think, if we look at it, any high level model that relies on data to evaluate lands will be limited. And so I think the best use of our effort at this point is highlighting individual properties or individual areas, clusters of parcels that are inappropriately either designated as or proposed for designation as prime ag or as rural, which I think is a point we tried to stress at the last meeting, right? That there are some rural residential properties that have been proposed for ag, but they're small parcels that are either already, they already contain dwellings, or that's what they're slated to be developed with.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that, we all get to a map and we outline or highlight areas that are just inappropriately proposed for designation either way, because ultimately any model that relies on data and relies on simplified information some outputs will be inappropriate, and so it's our job to find and identify those inappropriate areas.
Can we take one more? And I'm trying to develop some expediency here. I totally sympathize with Ken's frustration. It's totally expected here. Is there a way we can pull a few people into the same facility and try to go through these areas and get something productive done here? Because I think, given the numbers that we were looking at there, we've got to figure out where we will be excluding a good deal of non-productive land out of the proposed LEAR area map. Denzel, it looks like you want to say something.
I did. Another question, Lauren, and is it possible that we could work lockstep with rural development and the LEAR? Because a lot of my questions, and I get many questions, not specifically for this as much as there is about severances. When people understand there's something going on, they say, well, what is it? Well, then the next question is, of course, well, what about the availability of severances? So is it possible that, and Ken referred to the fact that it's delaying other processes. Well, is it possible that we could walk, again, lockstep with the LEAR and rural development, that they could address each other? And I don't know that.
Somebody address Denzel's question.
I think one thing that's important to note is that a lot of the inquiries that we have received are actually about people that are concerned about their severance rights.
Mhm.
And so, you know, if we do go into the interactive map online and look at those inquiries, we might find areas where people are unhappy with, you know, the severance rights that they're either losing or gaining via this process. So that's a resource that we already have available to us to look into.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'll reiterate, Councillor Ferguson, a lot of the people right now, and again, I don't want to throw out a stats here, but I would say I picked a few and just checked, and on almost everyone that I picked that came out saying I want to be able to subdivide for my daughter and my son and in the future, blah blah blah, don't even have those rights today.
Yeah.
I haven't found a single one. I think there was one, and they've already hired Xander Plan to sneak in not sneak in, but to get an application in before the fact that in case this was to go forward, they got an application in. You know, but right now we're not seeing everybody jump on consent and they're aware of what's going on here. But many people right now are just not understanding the current policy now. Was it for us to start explaining to, you know, because I don't want to say I don't want to do this, but for 60 people, for us to do a consent analysis on each one is about half an hour work to an hour work. We got about 60. So you're talking 300 to 600 hours of work just to review every request in that level of depth, because we have to go through Jira Warehouse, we have to go back through Parcel Fabric, we have to go back through land titles to see when those lots were created. And, you know, Mr. Kelly?
Just going to say, if I could jump in on that, I mean, part of the process that you're trying to go through here again is protecting the right lands. And now you're trying to look at making a decisions based on whether somebody wants a consent, not based on what's on the land. And I know people are going to argue with me about that, but that seems to be the thrust of this this conversation at this point in time. Remember, we're trying to designate land because of its potential or its farming potential, not because of what somebody wants to do 20, 30, or 40 years down the road, and maybe they might want to subdivide. Again, the majority of the LEAR, the LEAR is based on a soil classification number that you can't change. And it's the same thing if you try and just do the class 1, 2, or 3. And this is what we keep putting out here. We're going to end up with something that looks very much the same. And we're going to end up in the same situation of coming back to an agricultural committee and saying, how do we round out the edges? Where should the boundary be? Where should the considerations be? And I think Gabrielle has said again, she even had on the screen last time around where I think there were pins where the comments were, and you could actually go in and see the comments and things like that. So we've identified, we've done the things that you're asking us to do, to say, come back to the next meeting. We've done it. We had it done for the last meeting. And really, again, we need to get to the point of saying, here's the boundary that we think doesn't work. And I keep throwing out the same example. And I don't agree that there was any type of direct comment put back. That's why I suggested maybe we need a template where we identify the parcel of land. We say whether it's proposed to be ag or rural, and you as the committee write specifically down what the concerns are with that parcel of land so that it can be handed off to JL Richards and they can incorporate it into the overall proposed final map that has to go off to the county for their consideration. That's I mean, that's what I've proposed. You know, if we can, even if we go back to James Naismith Way, we put that on the map. Then we went off and we looked at another example. There was no conclusion that was drawn to say that is the direction on the way those lands were to be treated. I don't know. I mean, Gabrielle and Mark, do you know what to do with that James Naismith Way? Do you know where the line is going?
Well, I thought we agreed, but if we didn't, that's fine. But I agree. But the other component of that, Ken, is in the proposed area. If I take the numbers that were printed, I know they're working numbers, but if the LEAR proposed area is 15,000 hectares, and we started with a little over 11,000, but we lost some because it scattered out somewhere else, then we got 4,000 to 5,000 hectares of unproductive land sitting in that. can we spend some time looking at that and seeing if there aren't some areas that we should be just excluding at this time and saving the rural development headaches at a later date? And if you do that, then to a large extent, you tear apart the concept of a LEAR because it's no longer a solid paintbrush that you use in the area. So I think we're moving towards a modified LEAR or a non-LEAR, but at least a method that protects our farmland and protects the minimum distance separation without putting in some really logical pieces of property that are going to get opposed. Yeah.
And you just said it, a modified LEAR. This is exactly what we've said time and time again in this meeting. The LEAR and the output of that LEAR is not simply going to be the basis of the submission that's made. We need the input of this committee on those parcels. That is a modified LEAR, sir. That is what it is. It's exactly what you said.
Okay.
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 So just to continue on, I challenge you to provide us, if it's not working the way we're doing, where we're saying we want comments on this parcel of land here, I'm going to turn it around on you. I challenge you to provide us with the parcels of land that do not work so we can have a discussion about them. You're talking about 5,000 acres just in generalities. Find us the parcels that this does not work on and provide them to us so that we can have a discussion about whether the boundary should include them or not.
Well, you're playing games here. I think
we provided you with James Naismith Way. I think the last time around we provided something just off County 29, which was an area, I believe, maybe just around Waba Road, Gabrielle. It was a bunch of small parcels. We said this doesn't really fit in to be designated. I think it might have even been in the vicinity of Councillor Ferguson's property. It was one of the examples that you put up on the screen, and we asked for comment. We said, this, according to the LEAR, would be in. Let's have a discussion about it. Tell us why it shouldn't, where it should be in or out.
Yeah, well, I apologize for not sharing the meeting to achieve those. My understanding was we were doing general discussion of those to get a sense of the problem so that we could continue discussion at a further subsequent meeting and be able to answer better. And I've got to say that I've gone through each of the areas that are identified by concerned citizens. I'm able to discuss those. I'm more than prepared to discuss the border areas, the additional border areas that haven't been asked about there. I think it would be fair to ask maybe if we can have some help to identify the non-productive areas that are in here, because the paintbrush gets pretty thick and it's hard to see them. So
but I think Gabrielle asked you to define what non-productive is, because non-productive is not simply, if the soil classification is 1, 2, or 3, it's kind of a set. It's a set.
I think, Lauren, you're probably. So, Mr. Heslop, you're probably mentioning. In fact, I'll just share my screen quickly while I talk to this. Where's my share? You're probably mentioning the white areas. So, for example, on the right, tell me if you can see my screen. Oh, hold on, I haven't pressed.
Not yet.
Press share. Okay, there we go. I'm on one of my 3 screens here.
Mm-hmm.
So the one on the right here, the one on the right where my mouse is moving, that's from the LEAR. That's from OPA 29.
Yeah.
Right. So if we look at OPA 29, just to give you a comparison, and the one on the left is the one I was referring to back in 2018, and you'll see they're very, very close. And what Mr. Kelly and I were just repeating is there's some of these edge areas where by default of the scoring, and some of them aren't even, like I think when last time you had used this parcel as an example and it had scored 55, so it doesn't score 66, but the GIS had basically recommended that we basically follow this line. Now, this is where we're saying this is one of those edge areas where if you look at the 2018 exercise, it had been recommended, or in large part, to be designated because it was more than class 1, 2, 3, or there was active farming. And for example, this is the rural ag overlay. So these are some of the areas that we're kind of questioning, right? The orange you can see, or the pudding color, the vanilla color, is 95% identical in both situations, except again for some edge properties where here, for example, the LEAR is proposing that it be, no, actually these are the same. The one difference is in the 2018 one, it had basically taken the whole area because most of that area was 1, 2, 3 and adjacent. Whereas now, based on LEAR, there's a whole pocket here that's being recommended for removal.
Yeah.
And this is a funny one because this is one of the areas that's being recommended for removal, and we're actually getting a couple of submissions for the Four Corners Association asking that it all be brought in, where it currently isn't. Currently today, it's this brownish, right? This is the difficulty in implementation again. So the yellow color here, whatever color we want to give this, the vanilla color is the current ag designation. So using the LEAR approach, this whole area got taken out.
Yeah.
Whereas in 2018, the whole area got brought in. So that's one. These are some examples of advice or recommendation from the committee that would help us. The rest is all identical. Even if you go across the river, a large part of it is very, very similar in nature in terms of the proposals. I think what you're looking for, Mr. Heslop, is are there these areas, for example, that aren't productive, like these white areas here, which are not designated but are getting brought in? How much of those areas are there? That we can easily do through GIS, but at the end of the day, it's just going to give you a number. And what does that mean? It's going to capture those adjacent lands that the province wants us to capture. So all I'm going to be doing is giving you those areas that are in that are not 1, 2, 3, right? I'm only going to be giving you those adjacent lands. Are they productive? Are they not productive? Again, doesn't mean that because they're class 4, 5, 6, they're not productive. They're captured under that adjacent lands category. So we could do it, for example, here, LEAR's bringing this one in. LEAR in 2018, it wasn't being brought in because this parcel didn't have it. So now by default of just creating these areas. So this is where there was a lot of interpretation, and does the GIS carve out this parcel, or does the GIS basically just kind of create these areas? So these are the type of things that we would need advice on, because again, you can see they're very, very identical in nature, and I'm not going to go through the whole municipality this way, but this is why we had produced those maps, and then we were hoping that the Ag Committee would be able to take a pen to them and say, look, we've got the 2018, we've got the 2006 COP, we've got your LEAR, we know the ground, we know the methodology, we recommend you cut back here, and then what we'll do is we'll review the recommendations and we'll say, yes, we can support this through our methodology. We have enough information from what you're providing to say, yes, the rationale behind removing these areas is A, B, C, D. And the ministry said, as long as you have a rationale to why you want to add or remove, we're fine with that. And so right now we just threw this on the paper. We just, like you said, Lauren, we just threw the paintbrush on there, and we want discussions on what should be and what should not be. And that's like Mr. Kelly's saying, that's where we need input from the committee, because both approaches, whether or not you use because so much of the LEAR is based on soils, a lot of these two maps are going to be very, very close.
And another detail that we can look at as well is that if we did want to do a parcel by parcel look at, what is suitable or not suitable for prime ag designation, then the interactive map provides you with a lot of information to do just that. So you could press a parcel and it'll show you what class of lands are there and what score it has received associated with soils, and also, with whether it's being actively farmed. So regardless of the definition of what productive lands means, whether that means actually an agricultural production or has soils that support agricultural production, that's something that can be seen and looked into on the interactive map, because all that information there for each parcel is provided.
So can I just speak for a moment, Lauren?
Yep, please.
So listening to what's happening here, one of the things I had suggested at our last meeting was actually this committee needed to meet without the planners to actually talk about some of the issues that are brought up, like the definition of non-productive area. Well, if we're not going to meet as a group, like I could have an idea, you could have an idea, but we have to meet and be able to come up with that definition. That hasn't happened. And identify areas you might want advice on. Well, if we had those and we could talk as a group and then come back to you people, I think it's quite frustrating because you guys are light years ahead of us in terms of using the maps and whatnot. And I also think that, Ken, your idea of a template is actually, like, we do need a template of exactly what we're doing and why we're doing it. So, if we had a template that said, responsibility of the IGE committee is to define the non-productive areas. It would be really helpful because I just feel right now we go off and we're not quite sure what we're doing. It's fine to look at the map, and I've looked at the map and, you know, do I understand it completely? No, I don't. But I keep looking at it and I keep looking at comments, but I'm doing it in isolation. And I guess that's part of my frustration is I feel like we're all working in isolation and I don't think we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thanks, Bev. I think what we have been attempting to do is for the committee to establish the template, and I think that's getting a little bit difficult. But again, it comes back to what the committee is prepared to expend in time and energy, and I'm hoping we can get some time and energy on this. If we were to define an action coming out of this meeting, and I think one of the things we've never done is define actions as results of the meeting, then if one of the actions is for the committee members to study individually the 2018 map, the current map, identify the areas that are problems with the help of identifying problems that the consultant has identified here, does it make sense then to bring together the people within the committee that can find the time with perhaps Gabrielle? I'm not sure we can do this, that we should huddle by ourselves, Bev, because I think 30 seconds into the meeting, we'll have a question. But can we have somebody like Gabrielle for a couple of hours to go over these two maps, ask questions? I don't think we'll solve it all there, because Denzel, I think we may want to go out and look at a piece of agricultural land in your area and actually understand it a little bit better, or a piece of non-agricultural that's being developed before we make a final decision on it. But if we can get an action that, if the committee's agreeable to this, that we'll take the questions from the consultant on the areas, review all of them, and then come together in a meeting where we've done our homework with just perhaps Gabrielle there, and identify the areas that should be taken out or should be added, and see if we can accomplish that step. I accept your frustration, Ken, but I don't think we've ever, and that's the fault of the chair many times, is we've never said, here is the action that the committee has agreed to do between now and the next meeting. We need to write that down.
Yeah. So having said that, we're now 25 minutes after 1. What is our actions coming out of this meeting?
Ken, should we be taking those? I'm going to ask some questions on your question. I'm asking them of Mark. Should we be taking those almost 24 inquiries and making and figuring out recommendations for those problem areas, or are there specific areas you should be identifying to us that we should be providing comments on, or at least getting our own opinions on, and then we can meet and we can discuss them together? Because I don't think you want opinions from individuals.
No, I don't think there's any, I don't think we're gonna, and when there's probably over 60 requests, so I don't think the ag committee wants to sit there as well and go through the 60, and a lot of them are just we don't understand. We have comments, or some of them are we don't even want to participate in this project to exclude us, so so there's some that you can't really answer. Just leave me alone. We've got some that say, leave me alone. I don't want to be part of this. Okay. No, but I think Laura, we could probably do is I think right now, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm gonna share this, and if there's, I think we can, without having everybody, I think we can make Gabrielle and myself available to the committee for somewhat of a workshop session again, if we feel that's necessary to. Now, I guess I'm going to throw a few questions out. Is the committee comfortable? I know, Councillor Holmes, you indicated that you're still kind of trying to figure out the tools we're using, and I think we tried to make this GIS tool user friendly, but still it does have a lot of information because there is a lot of data sets that go into the methodology. And
Absolutely.
what we've done now is, and I think it should be fairly user friendly. And I think Gabrielle almost had an hour teaching session on this tool at the last meeting. But if there's still questions on how to use this, you know, we can, and Gabrielle can either individually or as a group explain again, because I think all the information that you're looking for is available on this tool. It's a question of, you know, which layers do you want to see, and even all of the identifiers. So these are all right now, I think they're pretty much up to date, Gabrielle? I think maybe today, I think we might have got a couple today.
Yeah, just about. I think we're maybe missing like 5 or 6 max.
And it's a very user-friendly tool, right? So the pink line is the proposed boundary, whereas the background hazy color there is the current designation. And then if you have these identifiers, as soon as you click on them, it'll actually tell you, you know, what lot in concession, who the person was, and what their concern was. And you know, that might help the committee in terms of seeing where some of the concerns are. They're all over the map. So I don't think if I was to tell you look at all of them, because they're all over the map. Literally,
no,
they're all over the map.
I quite agree with you. Yeah.
But there are some that, yes, we for sure, you know, there's maybe half a dozen that we think that, yes, it'd be beneficial, I think, to the process if there was a formal recommendation from the Ag Committee. So for example, if I was to take, and I don't want to take too long, I don't want to go through it, but if I was to take, for example, Huchiami's lands, just as an example here. So here we got a submission from Huchiami's lands, right? So they've provided a report from a Mr. Clark, who's an agrologist, who is arguing that they should not be prime ag based on his review of the soils, and therefore that might, and again, we haven't plugged in his comments to see if it takes him in or out, but that's one that as an ag committee, we could have a recommendation on some specific, if this is a you know, a larger parcel, and I'm sure his interest is in protecting the future growth lands as well. So this is a step into ensuring future growth lands in the future by having it rural. Right, it's always easier to grow into rural than it is to grow into agricultural. So right now, we do have a submission for his large parcel here. So that's one that we would like the Ag Committee to review Mr. Clark's submission and provide a formal recommendation. Well, now is that appropriate or not? I don't know, because why are we doing one more than the other, right? So I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure what the right process is on these, because like I said, we have over 60, and I don't think you guys want to be providing a response and a recommendation to all 60 of them. And should we be focusing on one more than the other? I'm not too sure. That's, I guess, a process question.
That my understanding from what we talked about before was that we would look at these examples and see what would the committee thought, and then try to formulate some guidance for you to be able to use that thinking in some of the other examples. And maybe we just didn't get that far in the last meeting, but I know at the bottom of Naismith, I thought there was a fair bit of clarity in the discussion that you know, if you include those houses, they're just going to get excluded the next time somebody comes around and does it. So we might as well do it now. Denny, you would not commit to that little area up there on the Indian Hill, or between there and Pakenham, that probably needs some discussion before we decide whether we include or exclude that.
Yes, I think it does. I think it does. Also, Deer Run Road, I think on the other side, Guava Road does. But I still have some issues without meeting personally. If we could meet personally and look at the maps in detail as a group, I think it would clarify a lot of it. And then Mark makes reference to 6 to 10 issues. I think we could address those major issues if we had the opportunity of looking at a map laid out on tables where we could be there physically and discuss it.
It certainly worked better that way the last time, but of course we didn't have COVID in place. But
yes.
Like here's another example. Here's another example I want to, you know, when we're talking about James Naismith. So again, when we told GIS to use the river as the border, because that's what OMAFRA had recommended, you clearly see here, right? We
Yep.
say we're going to use 66. I think it's 66, right, Gabrielle?
Yep.
So if you see
Yeah.
66 is the number, you know, we got 78, we got 70, 84, 71, 60. But yeah, of course, you're going to capture these small residential properties here, but you're also capturing all these shorefront properties here that are not scoring high, but by default of using the river as the end line, you're capturing all these ones. Right, and these are where we're getting some requests here. So, right, we're getting 2 requests here on lands that they're not understanding, and rightfully so. You know, these are scoring 20, 24, 26 average here, and yet so these people are questioning why are they being brought in as agricultural lands. So these are where, you know, if the committee was to say, look, we really should be pulling the line at the back of these properties here, then mark it up and provide it to me. And then that's what we need. So if you want to take a pen and you follow this line, you say, look, we really should be cutting the designation here. And the rationale is that these are whatever, we can find out the rationale why these scored so low, and that would be our rationale.
Okay,
John is not going to force those in.
Given the amount of time that you spent on that one right now, and this is good, I don't think the committee has a problem taking that pink line and moving it to the other side of the green through that whole thing. That one's done. But I go back to Denzel's comment. This is much easier to do if we can take yourself or Gabrielle with the maps in a room, and we go one at a time through a half a dozen and get to thinking. And we also have the time to ask the questions about, so are there other non-productive land areas that we should just plain take out now so that we don't have the difficulty? And is there farmland sitting out beyond this? How much good productive farmland was not excluded? What's the extent of the problem in the rest of the municipality? If somebody asks me, how much productive farmland did you sacrifice when you just went with pink lines? I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
Can we come
So
up
by
with
that
that
you
answer?
mean how much of the designated, I'm assuming you mean how much of the designated lands are excluded?
Yeah,
So
because
for example, this extension here. So these are
Yeah.
designated. These
Yeah.
are currently today, these
Yeah.
are designated. Now, how do you apply policy to these? Very difficult, but these are today designated. All right. So by default of the way we drew the line, again, it's the way we drew the line, right? Some of these are scoring 66, 73. So it was really just a question of how, you know, do we just jog out the line, or do we bring them in? Do we don't bring them in? So these are these edges again that Mr. Kelly and I were talking about. So these are.
So would those be considered like what we were talking about, having pockets or islands within areas? Would that be considered one of those pockets of productive
No.
land that?
No, because really right now they stopped at the concession road in terms of the 250 hectare area. They stopped at the concession road rather than continuing. Like this parcel could have been brought in, but then again, it's subjective in nature. Do you go and cut this person in, cut these ones out? You know, there's 2 farming. You can clearly see there's farming activity here.
Yeah.
So these are 2 properties that are today, although the farm is not even on the agricultural portion of this property, right? If you look at the designation is around the water, and the farm is actually in the rural portion of this property, right? So that's why it doesn't mean that even today, it doesn't mean that that we're designating farmlands either. Like right now, the designation actually doesn't even touch the farm. Same thing on the other side of the property. Like this property, you can see the farming portion, and this is the difficulty with the current schedule. The color you see here is the designation. Now, how does this work?
Mark, and I appreciate what you said there. Can you work with the map and tell us the number of hectares of productive farmland that is outside of the proposed LEAR area? Is that a significant number? Because if I'm going to speak not as a chair, but as a director for the Federation of Agriculture. We've got to be able to say, hey, that number was insignificant, so we turned our back on that productive farmland, even though we know productive farmland is important, or by golly, there's a large amount of it out there, and we got to try to save it through some other area like islands. Ken.
just going to say it's kind of a hard number for Mark to, I guess, present now, in that you
No, I
haven't had
don't.
to, if you haven't had the discussions about moving the boundary. Like, he just provided you with an example of an area that, using just straight LEAR and some judgment calls through GIS, they've drawn the line in a certain way.
Yeah, yeah.
You may have a discussion and say, no, let's bring that in. So now you've just brought in productive land, hasn't been excluded, right? So you've got to kind of work through some of this and have the discussion before you start asking for the aggregate numbers or the aggregate results.
Oh, I
This
think
is just raw at this moment in time, and like we're trying to get the input in here.
I don't. I'm sorry, Ken. I'm having trouble agreeing with you because I think what I'm asking is a 40,000 foot question, not a 10,000 foot question. There was a proposal in the report that was given to council that said that 15,000 acres would be the proposed map, and you started with 11,000 hectares. You started with 11,000 hectares of productive farmland, which I presume was the total for the whole municipality.
11,700,
Yeah.
I think it was.
So how much of that 11,700 is outside of the pink lines? Is it something we should be worrying about? If it's not a small number, we may as a committee say, let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the boundaries of what we have. I don't know the answer to that question.
So Lauren, I think I can get Chris to give us that answer fairly quickly with GIS. I think it's something, Gabrielle, correct me if I'm wrong, she's a GIS expert as well here, but I think it's a fairly easy exercise. Really, like, just visually, I can point out the area by four corners. I can point out that area I was just looking at by that water course, and some along these two edges. So really, you can see it's this green overlay is the current ag. But I could ask Chris to tell me what that represents in terms of an area. That's probably not a big exercise, and I can send that to you.
Yeah, that's quite easy. Like, you just take one layer. So we can take the proposed prime ag and basically just clip the other layer, and then we can just get that. We can get that number quite easily.
Excellent. Then we got a 40,000 foot perspective on that, because it may become the small problem. The bigger problem is boundaries, and is there some non-productive rural properties that we should take out of the proposed area and bring it down to a sensible number. And that, Scott, how is your schedule? I know you're busy. If can we find a couple of hours in your schedule in the next couple of weeks that we can sit down and look at these maps, or are you all over your gardens and very busy? Microphone.
Yeah, if we're ready to get down and start looking at these things closely, I can make the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bev?
Next week, I'm cutting corn all week, so I'm out from 6 o'clock in the
Well,
morning.
we need you. And we can wait till the week after if you're gonna have it all done next week.
Yeah.
Denzel?
Yeah, I think if we're looking at the first week of October, that's kind of what you're discussing, right?
Where are we? We are right now on the 21st of September. So first week of October, the fourth week of the 4th.
Yeah.
Jennifer, can you work with people to find out a time, or should we figure out the best day and the best time right now?
Yeah, it might be best to just pick a date right now. If in
Okay.
2 weeks works, then we can make that work.
All right, then let's find out what we've got. Week of October 4th. Today is Wednesday. Does Wednesday work with people?
The 6th works for me.
Yeah,
Pardon? The 5th or the 6th, I mean,
yeah,
10 o'clock in the morning,
yeah,
10 to 12,
Yep, good.
October 6th. And we'll do this in, again,
I was just going to ask a question there. I know, like, I'm kind of like the middle person here in this, right? I'm not part of the working group, don't have your deep agricultural knowledge. I'm not the planner, I'm not the GIS, I don't have that knowledge. But just as part of maybe trying to work this out, I know you want to meet in person. I don't believe that when you meet and you're looking at the paper maps, you have the same degree of information as you do through the tool that Mark and Gabrielle are putting up on the screen. They have an immense amount of layers and information there, and they can immediately change it to answer your questions. When you get to the paper-based tools, I know you want to use the paper-based tools and you want to be in a room together, but you're not, you don't seem to have the same level of information. I'm also going to say the last meeting when we tried to do kind of both, that didn't work. So what I'm going to suggest is that unless we can find a constructive way of doing the blend, where it is about, here's the exact piece of land that we want to talk about here. It's number 1. And everybody knows what number 1 is, the parcel of land we're talking about. And if they can put it on the screen and talk about the various layers from the soil to the impact data to the overlay from the past to today's overlay, unless you're willing to let them do that, I would suggest you do it by Zoom, because they'll be able to give you all that information to facilitate your discussion so that you can come to some reasonable output.
I guess again, I appreciate you being here. B, I appreciate your comment. I'm assuming if we had Gabrielle there, we would have a map up on a screen, and that you would be able to bring up each of the areas in a manner that we could understand to the level.
Yeah,
of
it'll probably be me, Lauren, but
okay. Yeah, that's good.
I know she's much prettier than I am, but hey, you might be stuck with me.
Hey, Mark, don't get me into that. That's not where I want to be.
It's always Gabrielle. What is up with us?
Harassment charges start now.
The only question I think I would have is more for Ken, just to make sure that I can be in the room. I don't mind being in the room. I think in the council setup last time, I know when I'm at the easel there, and I could probably, what we could probably do is still have, I think I'm not sure who from the committee has the hard copies right now. I'm hoping they're still in existence somewhere.
The ones you handed out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that same information is there, but I think Mr. Kelly's right that I think if I was in person, I would still probably use your big projector and still have the GIS up there, because I think there's way more data sets there than even I understand. But there is for sure areas that we can see. I've got one on the screen right now where it's not currently designated, and the whole quadrants being brought in, and I think we have 3 or 4 submissions there. So I guess the question is I think this is by the ski hill, if I'm not mistaken, but by Pakenham, I think. So, for sure, I don't mind going in person. I'm sure Mr. Kelly has all the protocols in place. I was at municipal office not long ago. Well, actually, it's been a while now. It's been a while since I've been there, but yeah, I'm double vaccinated. So if you need me there, I can arrange to get there. So.
Yeah, so Lauren, can I speak for just a moment, please?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I think in order to make this a productive session, we go back to the fact that we need the action items spelled out for us at what exactly we're going to do that day. I think that starting some kind of a plan of what we're doing, so we're tracking it on paper, I think is really important. So yeah, I would appreciate being there in person, because I think you get more work done that way, but definitely want a plan of what we're going to do and spell it out ahead of time so we can kind of be prepared and can a template,
I think we have to leave this meeting with defined actions written down.
That's right.
The easy one.
Gabrielle and I worked on a template. Gabrielle and I have a template already. I don't know,
good.
Gabrielle, if you think it will work, or if we need to make some adjustments, but we have a Word document. It's nothing fancy. It's just
that's fine.
But we have that already.
That's great. That's wonderful. So okay, I'm going to modify number 1. So Gabrielle is going to share the proposed template. Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 2, Mark, you're going to share out the 2018 map, the 1, 2, 3 and adjacent map.
Yeah, it's been sent to
Forrest?
Jennifer, so she should be forwarding that if she hasn't already.
Yeah.
Number three, can you identify a half dozen or better specific areas around the LEAR map that the committee should focus on? So if you identify a half dozen of those, then the committee must be agreeable to reviewing those before the October 6th meeting. So they're prepared to make comment on them. Is that okay? Am I out of
Now,
line?
is one meeting too much for the whole municipality, or did you want to split it, Ramsey, Pakenham?
Well, you know, I was looking for a failure mode for this upcoming 2-hour meeting, because if the meeting isn't successful, I have to go to Ken and say, this is the reason why we failed. We have to do something else. So, excuse my levity. So if do we have a logical question here? We've got Ramsey and we've got Pakenham. Would you, Denzel, would you like a 2-hour meeting on Pakenham Township?
Well, if we're doing 6 to 10, I think we could accomplish it in the 2 hours.
Well, I'm really hoping that we can also erode a half dozen chunks of non-productive rural land
Yeah. So
out of this LEAR.
Lauren,
Yeah,
before we do that though, we need some time to define a non-productive land. You know, I think we go back, we haven't done that. So that's really key in this meeting too. And I'm going to propose that let's go for 3 hours if we're there. Like I can handle 3 hours. I don't know, but
okay,
and let's like
Bev, all I'm saying is land that is not 1, 2, 3 or organic, that is substantive, that's inside that LEAR map. I'm not, yeah, I'm using the wrong terms. The LEAR map has captured some lands that are not 1, 2, 3 and organic.
so
They must
is
have.
that going to be our definition then of,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
unproductive land is,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you
that's-
think the
that's
rest of the
all.
committee will agree with that? I
Yeah.
think I think just for, I think it's something that we need to put up front at this meeting, so people understand. And I agree with you, actually. I don't know, what about you, Scott? And Denny, do you think that's a good definition?
I do.
I guess it's about as close as we can get now.
Yeah,
if
I
we-
think so too, but let's define that up front so people understand
Yeah.
very
'Cause if-
carefully. That's what we're
If
doing.
if we follow the LEAR, basically it would be anything that scores 65 or less. Right?
Yeah.
If we're saying anything that scores 65 or more is to be considered. All right, I'm using the word considered. I had this talk again this morning, and somebody said, because I'm 66 plus, does it automatically mean ag? And I said, no, it just automatically means that you're being considered as part of that
Exactly.
250.
Yeah.
Right. So I think if we say
65
where we
or-
need help is we have these scores, right? We have these scores on, and I'm not going to bring up the GIS and the map again, but we have these scores, and we are capturing these areas of less than 66. Are those areas, should they be just because they're there? Or that's where I want to work with you guys. So
Yeah.
even if it's 2 or 3 hours, I think we could probably start at the bottom of the map and make our way up all the way, and you guys assist in
I-
marking up.
I think we can. I think we can.
I think
And
we
you know,
can too.
but I think it's a commitment that we as committee members need to be a little more familiar with the map before we get in there. You know,
And that is what I would ask the committee members to spend some time on the GIS, and you know, if there's, you know, if Scott, for example, you don't understand how to figure out something on a specific layer, then reach out to me and Gabrielle, and we, you know, I don't want everybody just to nod, yes, we understand it now, and then not understand it. And like,
Yeah.
but if you have specific questions, because there's a lot of information, like Mr. Kelly said, you click on one parcel and every breakdown of the LEAR methodology is there, so you can actually see why one parcel was. But I won't disagree. There's many parcels that are not scoring 66 plus that are being proposed to be designated by default of us not knowing where to stop the line.
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's the big problem I'm having when I go through the map. Like I just, I sometimes
Okay,
I want to maybe just
I've
throw it
lo-
away.
I've lost track here. The first action was that Gabrielle was sharing the, I'm sorry,
Template.
the template,
yeah.
template. Second action was that Mark is sharing the 2018 map. The third action is that the committee is reviewing the maps and, sorry, third action is Mark is providing a half a dozen examples to look at where their boundaries or so on. Is that right? That's okay, Mark?
Yeah, we'll pick 6 specific inquiries that we think are of relevance to the exercise, because there's probably half of those that aren't even relevant. But
I know.
we'll pick 6 that I think we need specific input. But again, I think if we're going to spend 2 to 3 hours, I think we actually have time to look at the actual map itself from start to bottom.
I agree. And the third one, and I don't think we can ask you this, I think we've got to do this, is we've got to review that map and find those areas that are 65 or less and see if we can make a defense to exclude some areas. And maybe Mark, you can help us with that. If there's areas that are obvious, you can help us. But if we get,
Lauren,
yeah,
can I just interject? And key to that is for Danny and I getting copies of you know, the names of people who got letters, because it will help me as I look at things and look at people who have, you know, contacted me. I would really appreciate that.
okay, so the fourth action is that Jennifer will get the mailing information out to Denzel and Beth. And the fifth action is that we will have a next meeting on October the 6th, and it'll be 3 hours long.
Just one question. I question starting it at 10 in the morning. I know Merlin's not going to be able to make it that early. If we started a little later, he could be there for the first half of it anyway.
The problem being, I think Merlin only has like a half hour or an hour.
Let me talk to Merlin, because Merlin may be able to talk his way out of his job for a couple of hours there too. Let me give him a call and see if there's any flexibility there for him to help.
Can I get that trick?
Hey?
Yeah, me too, please.
Hey?
Can I get that trick? I
Well-
tried to use the bad internet connection a few times, but I'm kidding. Mr. Kelly's like, he did that this morning.
Now, I'm going to let Bruce Hudson know what we're doing. He's you know, he's a visitor to the committee, a lot of experience. I doubt that he wants to interact with this, but I'm going to let him know what we're doing. I guess actually, Jennifer, you're gonna let everybody know what we're doing when you publish the minutes of this meeting, correct?
Yep, I'll have all the action items included and more
Beautiful.
details. I'll also
Beautiful.
mention the new senior planner, Melanie Knight, will also be taking over this committee, but obviously we'll work together on the next meeting because it's a big one.
You're jumping ship on us, are you?
Yeah, sorry.
Well, thank you for what you've done to this one. All right. Ken, I recognize your frustration. I appreciate your frustration. It's probably helping us move as fast as we can. I didn't end up with 2 meetings out of this, but I ended up with 3 hours. So I think we have to succeed at the next meeting, or we have to fail at the next meeting. I don't know where we're going to go from there. I think we're going to succeed.
And it's not frustration. It's that, you know, there's an expectation that this gets completed. I mean, there's a lot of connections to what's going to happen in this municipality based on this. And, you know, this is a very key piece of work, and it's been brought back to this working group for comment. And, you know, everybody realizes that the value in what's going to happen at the next meeting and maybe meetings after that is what's needed. And that's where I was trying to get us to, is that we all understand. I mean, Gabrielle, Mark, we've said it several times. The data sets are not perfect. We're relying on you guys to round this out. That's why it's part of it. If this was as simple as the data sets, we would have been done 6 months ago. The county'd have this in their hands now, and we'd be off to the races.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there's a lot of connectivity here. And like I said, it's not frustration. It's just trying to get us to a point where the expectations that are on council, on all of us, are valid. And not that we're going to rush this, but that what we have is a reasonable and managed approach, and people can live with it. That's it. So
I'm gonna throw in one little additional thought here. Given the areas we're going to be looking at here, given the fact we will not have any boots on the ground by the time we're done that 3-hour meeting, there may be a need for a site visit. There may be a need to take what we concluded out of the meeting and review it. I think I can see the need for one more meeting to wrap on what we agreed on coming out of this meeting. We may have it all done by the end of next meeting, but I can see we may need to bring it forward into another meeting as quickly as possible after that, just to make sure that if there's any boots on the ground that has to happen before we reach consensus, we have the time to do that.
And I think Scott even brought that up. I think and I'm not trying to tag it to a person or not, Scott, but I thought you said like one time before, like if we need to go out and take pictures, we'll go out and take pictures as committee members, bring them back and put them on the table or whatever, and show them to you, and you guys can hash it out. Like we need to, like I said, identify the concerns and get your input on those concerns and figure out what it is. And if it means that, you know, one of the committee members goes away, or 2 or 3 or 4 in between a meeting, that's fine, Warren. It's just about getting to the point of having that discussion on parcels.
Okay, I'm going to have to exit this meeting. My calendar just reminded me that I have a meeting up the street in 3 minutes. So I'm
Better run.
I'll second that.
Okay,
I,
can I just ask a question before we
Yeah.
leave? I realize you have to run, Lauren, but first of all, how long do people have to get their comments? Is it the end of October or end of September?
September, I thought that.
We had said
End of
September
September.
30th.
Okay.
September.
And also, public meetings, we will be having some meetings with you know, in different areas in person, that people can come and look at the maps and make comments, or
I don't think that was in our work plan for this
I don't-
project.
I'm
Mark,
just
do
asking
you
'cause I
recall?
can't remember.
I don't recall. I mean, and I don't recall hearing that before, Bev, as a.
No,
I
I don't know. I can't remember.
I have to leave the meeting. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And we can talk next meeting.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to leave the meeting at this point. I apologize.
Meeting closed.
I guess.
Chairperson did it, I guess. Everybody in agreement with closing the meeting?
Yeah.
Just a quick one too, Mark.
Scott seconded earlier.
Yeah.
There. Well, there you go.
Mark, in your experience, are there any other municipalities that you're aware of that are struggling with this thing as well, that are also preparing, call it what you wish, be it a LEAR, whatever the hell else we want to call it? Are there any other municipalities that you're aware of?
Most of it will be done at the upper tier, right? It all depends whether or not you're in an upper
Okay.
tier, lower tier situation. Many municipalities that will either do a local plan update has to conform with the upper tier, right? So your goal is that the upper tier plan has done this exercise and has identified at a county level the proper agricultural lands. Now, Lanark County, being the first sustainable community official plan, really just took an amalgamation of everybody's plan and said, this is where we're going to start with, because it would have been a massive undertaking for them to actually do an agricultural designation review or even a LEAR review at a county level. So in terms of Lanark County, no. In terms of my other clients in Prescott Russell, it's done by the county. There's not much discussion at the local level. So even if I do have a dozen lower tier plans, the designation is derived from the upper tier plan. So that's fairly simple. If we get out into more of the Toronto area or Muskoka area, we've done a few in that area. It's never been as much as a topic as this. It's usually just kind of been the class 1, 2, 3. Usually the bigger questions are waterfront development, things like that when you get into that area. But no, this area, I would say agricultural lands has not been as much discussed as in Mississippi Mills, but everything gets discussed a lot in Mississippi Mills. Right? Natural heritage gets discussed a lot. Consensus, everything gets discussed a lot in Mississippi Mills.
Okay.
And good for council, good for the public. It's just it gets difficult when you're explaining very specific planning stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm guessing that a lot of, and even, Tim and I were talking about this in the Ottawa plan, where now the Plan Act doesn't even permit you to appeal an official plan now. And a lot of the complaints we get is at time of development, which is way too far down the road. Like it's set at policy level, right? Like if I'm proposing a 40-story high-rise building on a specific corridor next to a transit, it's in the OP. If nobody in Ottawa, you're probably going to have a handful of people that are coming out to talk about the official plan, but then come that 40-story building application, the whole municipality's out, the whole neighborhood's out, and you can't appeal the OP anymore. So it's going to be interesting in the coming years. Now, even with I'm giving Ottawa as an example because that's probably the most development we'll see in this area. They're working their new official plan. You can't appeal it. There's no appeals now under an official plan. So come time for zoning is only going to implement the official plan. Site plan is only going to follow what zoning has given you as rights. So it's an interesting process. So for example, for Mississippi Mills, if we were doing a new official plan, council decides what the agricultural lands are with public input. If the public's not happy, so be it.
Yeah.
The only big difference with you guys compared to Ottawa is you're in a lower tier, upper tier. So the upper tier has to have the same approach or the same mapping, right? That would be the only difference. So I think you guys are doing it because you guys haven't done it since 2006. That's why this is on the table right now, right? Like if we would have done it as part of the last 5-year review, then it wouldn't be on the table here now. I'm not too sure of other municipalities right now. I'd have to ask Tim. I think he was working on a couple of other plans in Lanark County. I don't recall this topic ever coming up in his OP reviews. But that's, that doesn't mean it hasn't. If he's working on it, I'm not. So I'm not, I can ask him, but I don't think so. We would have heard about it, but it'll be interesting when Lanark County starts their next review, because I don't think the ministry is going to be as flexible with them saying, don't worry about natural heritage systems and don't worry about agricultural and don't worry about population updates and employment lands and affordable housing and so on and so on. So it'll be a big undertaking for Lanark County in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay, good. Thank you for that.
Okay.
No problem.
Yep.
Thanks so much. Okay, well, I've got to get back to work, so I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
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 See you guys.
Again.